everybody.
I'm Mitchell Butler.
And I'm Victoria Gerasi.
And today we're going to educate you about
cells.
First is a prokaryotic cell that is known to be very small and simple. It is made up of non-membrane bound organelles, DNA, and no nucleus. Around the cell they have three layers to protect it: the cell membrane, the cell wall, and the capsule. The capsule is a slime layer that surrounds the cell. It also has little leg-like things called the cilia that help it move around. It also has one big tail at the end of it called the flagellum.
Next, there is the eukaryotic cell, which has DNA, a nucleus, and membrane-bound organelles. It is on the larger side of things and is very complex. Also, it has two types of cells within it. It has the animal cell and the plant cell. Who knew?
Cells, they're made of organelles. Try to pull it fast when the cytoplasm gels.
In the cell, there's always a cell membrane. It contains what energy exists throughout the cell.
There's also a cell wall, which provides structure and protection for the cell.
Also in this cell, there's the cytoplasm that takes up all the empty space.
Throughout the cytoplasm, there are also ribosomes, which make proteins for the cell, which are needed.
On the cytoplasm, there are lysosomes that digest the waste throughout the cell.
There is also an organelle that transports stuff throughout the cell, which is known as a vesicle.
Only in the plant cell, there are chloroplasts that convert sunlight to glucose to make energy for the cell.
In the plant cell, there is something called the vacuole, which is a storage place for the cell and holds up to mostly all water.
The Golgi apparatus is the organelle that packages, receives, and ships proteins to the correct location throughout the cell.
In the cell, there is mitochondria, which is responsible for cellular respiration, and in other words, making energy.
The endoplasmic reticulum, which is a network of membranes throughout the cytoplasm.
The endoplasmic reticulum is also known as the ER, and is made up of the smooth ER and the rough ER.
The smooth ER is the site of lipid production.
And the rough ER is the site of protein synthesis.
Then there's the nucleus. The nucleus is the control center of the cell and contains the cell's DNA.
Inside the nucleus, there is also something called the nucleolus, which sends out information from the nucleus to the cell.
Surrounding the nucleus is the nuclear membrane, which is also covered by nuclear pores, which controls what goes in and out of the nucleus.
A few moments later.
To sum up everything we've discussed so far, there are similarities and differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. The similarities is that they both have a cell membrane, they both have DNA, and they both have cytoplasm. The difference is that prokaryotic cells have a nucleus. The difference is that prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, but eukaryotic cells do. It's simple and complex, meaning the complex is the eukaryotic and prokaryotic are not very complex, so they're simple. And the prokaryotic cells are a lot smaller than eukaryotic cells.
Throughout the cell, many of the organelles can be compared to many things, especially in the world around us. And in school, many of the things that we do in school can be compared to the cell itself.
In school, the principal can be compared to the nucleus of the cell because they'll tell everybody what to do.
In the cell, there is also an organelle called mitochondria, which we discussed earlier. And the mitochondria takes place as the cafeteria of our school because the food that they distribute to us gives us energy for our day, and that is exactly what the mitochondria does.
The lysosomes of the cell like the janitors of the school because they find the unwanted waste and dispose of it properly.
The nucleolus, which is also one of the cell organelles, can be compared to as the secretary because both the nucleolus and the secretary both send out information to the other parts of the building or the cell.
The cytoplasm of the cell is like the students of the school building because it just takes up space.
The cell membrane is made up of various things, and the main thing is the phospholipid bilayer, which is made up of phospholipids. After discussing about the animal and plant cell, it is definitely clear that they both have a few differences between both of them. Okay, so, for example, the animal cell has lysosomes, where the plant cell does not. The plant cell has chloroplasts, and the animal cell does not either. And also, the plant cell has a cell wall, where the animal cell only has a cell membrane. So the plant cell has a cell membrane and a cell wall. And last but not least, they both have two different vacuoles. For animal cell, it has a temporary vacuole, where the plant cell has a large permanent vacuole. Aside from the topics that we've discussed so far within this video, there's something called passive diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Now, to explain, diffusion is when something is able to go through the membrane. So, passive diffusion is when something goes from high to low concentration using no energy, and concentration is when it has less water. Then there is facilitated diffusion, which is when something goes from high to low concentration using assistance to go through the membrane.
Other than diffusion, there are different ways to get into the cell. One way is endocytosis. Endocytosis is when an object or objects go into the cell by pushing against the membrane, and the membrane pinches around it to form a vesicle. There are two forms of endocytosis, phagocytosis and pinocytosis. Phagocytosis is when a large object pushes against a cell and performs endocytosis, but pinocytosis is when smaller objects group together to push around the cell and then perform endocytosis. Now they get out of the cell by exocytosis, and that's when the vesicle's membrane reattach to the cell membrane and then the objects go out. There's also another topic we would like to discuss, and it's about cell theory. There are three parts of cell theory. There is the basic unit of life, all cells are created by other cells, and every organism is made out of cells, which was discovered by three guys that we will discuss in a moment.
In biology, there is a very famous scientist named Robert Hooke. He created our first compound microscope. And since doing so, he ended up seeing the first plant cell. So, while he was seeing this plant cell, he thought in his mind that it looked like a prison cell. So that is exactly why we call cells cells right now. There is also a very important scientist that was known as Anton van Leeuwenhoek. He is the one who improved microscopes using grinding lenses, and since doing that, he ended up seeing the first living animal cell. Now back to our discussion about the cell theory from earlier. There were three guys that created that and discovered the cell theory. And that was Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow. Now, Schleiden studied plant cells, Schwann studied animal cells. Those two were the ones that came up with this theory of free cell formation. And they also thought the cells were the basic unit of life. Also, there's a guy named Virchow, and he wanted to prove Schleiden and Schwann wrong. He did not believe what they thought about the whole free cell formation thing. He thought that cells came from cells. I hope you all enjoyed this educational video.
Please like, comment, and subscribe.
Bye!
Cells, they're made of organelles. Try to pull a fast one, the cytoplasm gels.